There's a version of your net worth that's being shaped today, and you probably didn't notice it happening. Not because of a big promotion, not because of a massive investment, not because of some dramatic financial breakthrough, but because of something much quieter, a daily decision, the kind that feels too small to matter. And that's exactly why it matters so much. Most people imagine net worth changing in events: buying a home, selling a company, getting a raise, receiving a bonus. Those moments are visible, they're easy to point to, but net worth is rarely built in those spikes. It's built in the drift between them, in the ordinary days where nothing dramatic happens except your habits quietly reinforce a direction. Because wealth isn't just about what you earn, it's about what you repeatedly do. There's something psychologically dangerous about small decisions. They don't trigger urgency. If you skip investing this month, nothing explodes. If you overspend slightly this week, there's no immediate consequence. If you delay learning a skill, no one calls you out. The impact is delayed. And because it's delayed, your brain labels it as low risk. But delayed doesn't mean insignificant. It means compounding. Small behaviors, repeated, create long-term pattern, and patterns determine outcomes. Think about time horizon. If you think in days or weeks, your decisions optimize for comfort. If you think in years or decades, your decisions optimize for stability. When you zoom out, the conversation changes. It's no longer, can I afford this today? It becomes, is this aligned with where I want to be 10 years from now? That shift alone reshapes behavior because long-term thinking creates filters, not restrictions. Filters. You stop asking whether something is affordable. You start asking whether it supports your trajectory. Take something simple. If you automate even 10% of your income into investments, your net worth begins moving upward quietly. You don't feel it immediately. The first year feels almost unimpressive, but 5 years later, the compounding is noticeable. 10 years later, it's meaningful. The habit didn't feel powerful in the beginning. Time made it powerful. Time amplifies consistency. It doesn't amplify intensity. A single intense financial decision might spike your balance, but repeated moderate decisions shape your base. And your base determines stability. The same logic applies to spending. Overspending occasionally won't collapse your future, but habitual lifestyle inflation slowly reshapes your financial ceiling. Every time income rises, if expenses rise with it automatically, net worth growth stalls. Not dramatically, gradually. It feels harmless in the moment, but over a decade, that drift compounds just as aggressively as investing would. The direction matters more than the speed. There's also the income side of the equation. Daily decisions shape earning power too. 10 minutes of skill building a day feels trivial. Reading about your industry once a week feels minor. Asking one thoughtful question at work feels small. But these habits increase competence. Competence increases leverage. Leverage increases income. And increased income, if paired with consistent investing, accelerates net worth growth. Again, the chain begins small. It's almost invisible until you zoom out. Behavioral consistency is the real engine, not motivation, not occasional discipline. Consistency. When your financial growth depends on how you feel, progress fluctuates. When it depends on systems, it stabilizes. Automatic transfers reduce friction. Scheduled reviews prevent avoidance. Predefined contribution percentages remove negotiation. You're no longer asking yourself every month whether you should invest. You just do. And that predictability reduces emotional interference. Emotion is expensive when it controls money decisions. Consistency is cheap and powerful. There's also an identity layer. Every small aligned financial action reinforces a self-image. When you invest consistently, you become someone who invests. When you track spending calmly, you become someone who is aware. When you prioritize assets over impulse upgrades, you become someone who values ownership. Identity compounds too, and identity shapes future behavior. If you see yourself as disciplined, you're more likely to protect your trajectory. If you see yourself as careless, you unconsciously reinforce that pattern. Daily decisions are less about money and more about reinforcing identity. Here's something subtle but important. Financial stress rarely comes from one catastrophic event. It often comes from slow drift, repeated small misalignments, subscriptions you forgot about, small upgrades that became permanent, spending that slightly outpaced earning. Nothing dramatic, just misdirection over time. The opposite is also true. Financial stability rarely comes from one lucky event. It comes from small alignments repeated, tiny increases in contribution rates, Gradual debt reduction. Consistent income growth. It's almost boring until you look at the results. When you zoom out 10 or 15 years, the pattern becomes obvious. The person who automated early has compounding working quietly. The person who reinvested, raises instead of inflating lifestyle, has margin. The person who built skills gradually commands higher income without panic. They didn't rely on a breakthrough. They relied on direction. Direction beats intensity because intensity fades. Direction persists. There's also an emotional feedback loop. When you see even modest progress, a slightly higher investment balance, a slightly lower debt balance, your anxiety decreases. Lower anxiety improves decision-making. Better decisions improve outcomes. Improved outcomes reinforce identity, and the cycle strengthens. Small wins reduce stress. Reduced stress increases clarity. Clarity improves net worth. So daily decisions don't just affect numbers. They affect mental bandwidth, and mental bandwidth affects everything else. The turning point is recognizing that today is not isolated. Today is a vote for the kind of financial life you're building. You don't need perfection. You need alignment more often than misalignment. If most of your daily decisions nudge you toward ownership, skill growth, and margin, time will amplify that. If most nudge you toward consumption without structure, time will amplify that too. Time doesn't judge. It multiplies. Practically, this doesn't require extreme action. It might mean increasing contributions by 1% this year, reviewing expenses weekly without shame, keeping lifestyle growth slower than income growth, investing consistently, regardless of headline, building one new professional skill every quarter. Tiny adjustments, repeated, protected. These are not flashy strategies. They're durable ones. There's something deeply calming about this perspective. You don't need a life-changing event. You need continuity. You don't need to get everything right this year. You need to stay pointed in the right direction. Long-time horizons forgive small mistakes. They smooth out volatility. They reward repetition. If your daily behavior supports asset growth and income resilience, your net worth will eventually reflect it, not because of one bold move, but because of thousands of small ones. In the end, your net worth is a reflection of accumulated decisions, not the loud ones, the quiet ones, the automatic transfer you set up years ago, the raise you partially reinvested, the skill you practiced even when it felt minor, the expense you chose not to inflate. None of them felt dramatic, but together, they shaped your financial reality without noise, without applause, just direction. And direction, over time, becomes destiny, not suddenly, gradually, built one ordinary decision at a time. And one day, you'll look at your life and wonder when it changed. There won't be a dramatic breakthrough, no single moment you can point to, just quiet evidence, an investment account that feels steady, a skill that now earns more than it used to, a life with margin instead of pressure. And you'll realize, it wasn't intensity, it was direction. Not one bold move, but hundreds of ordinary ones. Because today was never just today, it was a vote. And over time, those votes became your future.